You mentioned tools. Do you have any examples?
Yeah, there are tools you can use to help you manage the thought process. They're a little bit more involved and they take a bit of a while to explain. But essentially, when your brain says, let's have a drink, you need something to say that's going to be different to interrupt that thought process. Because if you don't interrupt it, it ends up being a circle and you end up dwelling on it and it gets very annoying. I also spend a lot of time talking to people about ways to handle the conversation around not drinking. You get, have a drink, Dave, and he's like, go on, have a drink. And you need something to say to him. You need to understand where he's coming from. And a lot of the time, you got to be quite careful with people like that. You got to not push too hard against their ego because then they will push back. We use various phrases. One I'm a big fan of is, I'm not drinking at the moment, and it seems to be working out for me.
That's good.
I'm never going to drink again, and it's the best thing I ever did. But I will quite often say to people, I'm not drinking at the moment, seems to be working out for me, because it's not got quite so much pushback. It's not, I'm not saying not drinking is the best thing ever and you should stop drinking, Dave. I'm just saying I'm not doing it and it seems to be all right for me. I'm not even really that sure about it, Dave. What are we talking about? Yeah, things like that to take the sting out of it and to help people manage the situation.
Have you had any really bad situations like that where it's got a bit confrontational and you felt really uncomfortable, like when people are trying to peer pressure you in the past?
No, not really. I'm quite lucky that most of my friends aren't idiots.
Yeah. That helps.
Most of my see, the thing is, I still hang around with some people who drink quite heavily. I just tend to leave the party at about 11:15 because 11:15 is always the point where it goes south, isn't it? And it's happened to me not so long ago. I was at a party. I love all of that. They're great and everything. And it was like 11 o'clock. I'm like, I'm off. Said goodbye to everybody, out the door, 14 minutes past 11. Spoke to one of my friends the next day and I was like, oh yeah, how are you? I'm all right. I was like, how was the rest of the party? He's like, it went totally wrong after you left. I was like, yes, that is why I left.
Yeah, nothing good happens after 11:15. I've heard it's nothing good happens after 1 a.m, but I think 11:15 is probably more accurate.
Maybe, look, Jacob, you're a little bit younger than me, so you can stay up a bit later than me. I'm getting old, man.
No, honestly, at 11:15, I am shattered. I want to go back as well. I normally do, to be fair. Yeah. What's the difference between cognitive realignment and white knuckling through sobriety? I've heard you mention cognitive realignment before. What does it actually mean?
Yeah, so that would be really getting to grips with your beliefs. So if you think of, there's a hierarchy to change, isn't there? You can change what you believe about something. You can give yourself more skills and abilities. You can change your behavior or you can change the environment in which you are in. Now, if you change your beliefs, cognitive realignment, and then learn a few skills, it makes dealing with the behavior pretty easy. And it actually doesn't matter what environment you're in. But most people do it backwards, don't they? They change their environment by pouring all their booze down the sink and getting rid of the booze in the house. And then they try and change their behaviors. But they don't give themselves any skills to help them change those behaviors. And they never, ever even think about their beliefs. So they continue to want to drink. And that's why they have to force themselves not to do it. The problem, of course, with willpower and trying to white knuckle it is that willpower is a limited resource. When you wake up in the morning, you use a little bit of your willpower to work out what to wear. You use a little bit more of your willpower trying to find your keys. When you're at work, you spend a little bit of your willpower trying not to use Facebook all day and a little bit of your willpower trying not to punch your boss in the face. Then you spend a little bit more willpower trying to get home through the traffic. You use a little bit more willpower deciding what to have for dinner. You use a little bit more willpower deciding what to watch on TV, by which point all of your willpower has gone. And you think now might be a good time to have a drink.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the case. I think that's probably why I go to the gym in the morning, actually, just so I can use my willpower reserves.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a very similar strategy. I try to exercise before I'm really awake.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea. What is the three pillar approach to sobriety?
There's lots of different ways you can think about sobriety. The way I tend to think about it these days is thinking more around what you might call recovery capital, which is just the nuts and bolts of it, which would be making sure you've got enough money, you've got somewhere to live, you've got transport. And I think a lot of the time we take that for granted, but it is actually quite important. Access to healthcare is the one that I find people struggle with the most. When they're drinking, they tend to have got out of the loop of having a doctor, seeing the dentist, those kind of things. Most of the time, the people that I work with, we're thinking about healthcare more than anything else. But absolutely, if you have not got somewhere to live, a reliable source of income, then it's going to make getting drunk look like quite a good alternative, isn't it? You also need to think about trigger management, which is some of those skills that I've talked about. So you are going to be in situations which will make you think, I need to have a drink. Those could be obvious things like you're at a social event where everyone's drinking, but it could be less subtle things like celebrating. If for 20 years you have done nothing but celebrate without alcohol, then the first time you go to celebrate something, even if it might be a month of sobriety, your brain is going to say, oh, you deserve a drink. So you've got to learn to manage those triggers, the less subtle ones like celebration and stress, or the more subtle ones like people drinking around you. And then finally, connection is such a huge part of sobriety. There's no point in getting sober if you're not going to spend your time being sober with other people. The point of it is to improve your relationships. And to really dig into that connection and really to do that properly, you need to work on your emotional intelligence. They say you don't grow when you're drinking, which is what I use to justify the fact that I'm only 25. But actually, what they really mean is emotionally, we don't grow and we don't develop and we don't learn the skills that we need to have proper grown-up relationships. That is another important part of it, increasing your emotional intelligence. So those are the three things I would always encourage people to work on, making sure you've got that solid base, that recovery capital, that you're able to manage the triggers, and that you're starting to think about how you can become more self-aware, regulate your emotions a bit better, deal with other people a bit better, increase that emotional intelligence.